We're live.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. This is our Committee of Adjustment and regular council meeting for Monday, June 27th. We'll get started with Committee of Adjustment here in just a second. We have two matters to consider through that committee. And then when we're done with those, we'll move over to our regular council agenda. Before we get started, Deputy Mayor Anderson has sent his regrets. He's attending a graduation ceremony, so he will not be joining us this evening. But otherwise, I think everybody's here. So we'll call the Committee of Adjustment meeting to order. Tonight we have a public meeting which is being held under sections 45 and 53 of the Planning Act to consider a consent application and a minor variance application. The minor variance application, which is A22-06, is for the property located at 105 Morden Drive in the town of Shelburne. The purpose and effect of this application is to request relief from sections 3.4 sub 1 sub 2 and 5.68 of zoning bylaw number 38-2007 in order to construct a converted dwelling with a second dwelling unit in the cellar of an existing single detached dwelling. The application is seeking relief from the regulation which states that a dwelling unit shall not be located in the cellar of the dwelling. The consent application, which is file number B22-02, is for the property located at 307 Victoria Street in the town of Shelburne. And the purpose and effect of this application is to sever a portion of the property to have a land area of 392 square meters to create a new residential lot for a single detached dwelling on the subject land. The retained land will have an area of 440 square meters and is to be used for an existing single detached dwelling. The applicant has also submitted an application for a zoning bylaw amendment concurrent with this application, and that's on the agenda for the regular council meeting. I'll now ask the clerk to provide the method of notice for tonight's public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in local media sources. Notice is posted on the town of Shelburne website, and property owners within a 60-meter radius have received notification.
Okay, thank you. In the case of both applications this evening, we're going to receive a presentation from our town planner that will provide a summary of written comments received. And following that presentation, there will be an opportunity for comments from committee members as well as any members of the public who have signed on. Steve Weaver, our planner, is otherwise engaged with some other commitments for at least a portion of this evening. So his colleague Valerie Schmidt has joined us. So Valerie, welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure. And I think you're going to start us with the consent application.
Yep, I'll put up my presentation. Just bear with me. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Great. Yes, so the following, I'm just going to do an overview of the application and talk about any comments received. But this public meeting is being held as an application for consent has been submitted by Anthony and Christy Savelsky for the creation of one new lot on the property known as 307 Victoria Street. The property is located at the southeast corner of Victoria Street and Center Street. The property is designated residential medium density in the official plan, and it's located within the built boundary, and it's currently zoned residential type 2 zone. So you can see from the aerial, the existing lot's currently occupied by a single detached dwelling. From the aerial, you can also see within the surrounding communities, there are some similar lot sizes within the local area. Also, similar low density infill residential lot severances have been previously approved with similar lot, like on these corner lots. And these lot sizes have ranged from about 300 to 400 square meters. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the sketch that was provided for the severance. You can see that the newly created lot here in red is the one that's being proposed within the rear yard of the existing lot. And this would front onto Center Street. So the proposed parcel will have an area of 392 square meters and have 19.8 meters onto Center Street. So the retained parcel is proposed to have an area of 440 square meters, and it will have or maintain its frontage of 16.8 meters onto Victoria Street. So as discussed, the proposed lot size do not meet the lot area and setback requirements within the R2 zone, and they will require a zone change to a site-specific residential type 2. An application for zoning bylaw amendment has been received with the consent application and will be discussed at the public meeting as part of tonight's council meeting. So you can see the severance sketch also illustrates the proposed lot configurations as well as the existing and proposed buildings. So you can see the outline. I mean, this is all existing, and then this is the proposed dwelling over here. And again, we'll go into details at the public meeting for the zone change, and we'll discuss further the setbacks that are being requested. Yeah, these are just outlining again. We'll go through these in more detail. So subject to, I should come before I discuss the recommendation. I just wanted to say that the applications were circulated to internal departments as well as external agencies, and there was no objections or comments received. So subject to any consideration of input received at the public meeting tonight, it is recommended that the Committee of Adjustment grant conditional approval of the consent application. And this is subject to the standard conditions, including the Secretary Treasurer certificate, cash in lieu, parkland, as well as a consent agreement. What I wanted to highlight with the consent agreement is number D, is the design guidelines and heritage committee review. I just wanted to point out that the existing dwelling on the property has not been designated under the Heritage Act, and the property is not listed in the as an official register for significant built resources. However, it is located in an area with other examples of existing properties that have historical significance in the area. With that, there is a condition of approval that's being recommended to require design guidelines for the new lot to ensure that design of the new dwelling fits with the area and will contribute. And this will also go to the Heritage Committee and they can provide additional feedback onto the ultimate design of the new building on the new lot. And then the other general conditions would also be that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved, a draft reference plan be submitted, and that all these conditions need to be satisfied within 2 years. So that kind of concludes my overview of the application.
Thanks, Valerie. If you could just take the screen sharing down so I can see everybody. Great, thank you. Okay, are there questions for Valerie from the committee members? Member Bernardo.
On the new lot, where the proposed housing is going, there's very little space between the back of the proposed housing space and the lot line. How much space is there? I couldn't quite make it out on the drawing you had.
Are you referring to the rear yard setback?
Yeah, the new lot rear yard setback.
It's 5.1 meters. But what we're contemplating, or not contemplating, what we're proposing in the zoning, and we can discuss it further too, is the exterior side yard is being proposed at 6 meters, which will provide, it's larger than what's required, and it will provide some additional amenity space within the side yard.
And where is the driveway proposed to go?
It will be from the laneway.
From the laneway, from Center Street or the laneway?
It's from the laneway off Center Street.
Off Center Street. And the house is facing Center Street?
Yes. It would be fronting onto Center Street.
And how much space is there between the laneway and the proposed house?
6 meters is what's being proposed.
12 feet. No, 6 meters. Sorry, I'm old school.
Almost 20.
I have to convert everything into feet.
I'm terrible at conversions.
Close to 20 feet, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It's 3 feet for every meter.
Yeah, 3.3, I think. So it's, yeah, 20 feet more or less, yeah.
More or less, the driveway. So that will allow for 2 cars at least. The garage is proposed facing in there too, I gather. Or is there a garage?
I'm not sure if they are including a garage or not, but 6 meters is the required length for a driveway.
6 meters is the required length for the driveway.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any member Buffett?
Yes, has there any consideration been given to taking some of the portion of the back of the lot of the existing home and adding that to that property so that it has a bit more space behind the back of the house?
I believe they wanted to maintain the rear yard of the existing house as much as possible, just because of the historical, like the heritage in the area and keeping with the similar lots within the area. Other than that, I can't really comment too much further.
Yeah, because it works out to, I changed it to feet, works out to be 16.73 feet, which is a pretty small area.
Yeah, I think the interior side yard is what you're referring to, and it's 1.2. I think that's pretty standard now with new lots being created. It's adequate enough to provide access. I mean, typically rear yards are used as accesses from the front yard to the rear yard. And also providing any kind of drainage that's required as well. I think the 1.2 that they're providing is satisfactory in that regard.
Yeah, I think the applicant is online, and if they'd like to offer any comments, I mean, that's more than appropriate. I had a similar question, member Buffett, and that was why is the retained lot so much larger than the proposed new lot? Is there a way to sort of equalize those a little bit? But Christy, do you want to shed some light on your rationale?
Sure. My husband Matt is here. He's going to speak.
Okay. Hi Matt. How are you?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think we looked at the minimum requirements, and Valerie was right. We were just trying to, because our kids have played in that backyard, and we would hate to see it carved up completely. We were just trying to create a new lot that would be sufficient for a decent sized house without taking too much of the existing lot. So basically trying to thread the needle with meeting as many of the requirements as possible. And we also walked down the lane and looked at the property that was just severed on Mill Street. And we kind of did some rough measurements there. And I think our lot is actually bigger than what they did down on that corner. So we wanted it to, satisfy a new builder potentially, and also not, quote unquote, ruin the current property, if that makes sense.
Okay. Member Fegan.
The only other concern that I had was in regards to looking at the overhead view that we had, the actual photographs. It looked like there was a number of very older trees, and I might be concerned about losing a lot of that canopy. Has there been consideration on replacing any trees that would have to be torn down for this?
I think there's only one tree that would really be required, which is basically where the house would be. But the other large tree is very close to the curb on Center Street. And if the driveway is coming off the lane, that tree wouldn't be affected. And the other trees are on our neighbor's property, so they're not even something we have purview over.
I think it's also important to just clarify that when we created this application for consent, we were told to put a potential home on the land just for all these measurements' sake, but we have no intention of building. We want to be able to sell the lot to somebody who either wants to retain it or to eventually build on it, but we have no plans of severing to build. We just want to be able to sell that lot. So the dimensions of whatever home goes on it or whatever like Heritage Committee might need would have to be fulfilled by whoever buys the lot. We have no intention of building it. It could remain empty for years as far as we're concerned.
And just to add to that, the proposed dwelling that we put on the application, we're basically just trying to determine how big we could, like what size structure we could put on there. And I believe it's 30 by 35 or 30 by 40.
We basically replicated the house that just went up on Mill Street.
Yeah. So with some more like an additional floor, I mean, it could be a significantly sized dwelling, but again, that can be tweaked or adjusted by whoever is planning on building there eventually.
Valerie, just on that point, sorry, and then I'll go back to Member Bonato. One of the elements to be included in the consent agreement, which would be a condition of this approval, is to provide the design guidelines. So presumably, even though the applicants aren't planning on building the home themselves, in order to fulfill the conditions and finalize the severance, some design guidelines are going to have to be provided, correct?
That's correct. And as part of the consent agreement, we would also be taking closer detail into the location of the driveways and any tree removals and replacements as well.
Okay. So even though, you folks may not be planning on building yourself sort of on spec and selling it, to a certain degree, I guess you will be kind of, tying any potential buyer into certain design elements.
Yep.
Okay. Member Bonato?
The sewage allotment that you're not building on it, I gather that potential builder, there's a time, like our sewage allotment right now is getting very tight.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not done within a certain period of time, there won't be a sewage allotment for it.
Okay.
I'm just not sure if you knew that part of it as well.
You go ahead.
Yeah, so we've heard kind of conflicting reports on what's available and what's not to bigger developers and to like one-off projects like ours. So we don't have any confirmation on that. But it's a question we have too, in terms of if we only have 2 years to meet certain consents to make it happen, but there's a longer wait time than 2 years on sewer and water, where does that leave us in being able to meet the conditions of consent if somebody wasn't able to build anyway because of the lack of sewer and water?
Well, right now, I believe we have some put aside for properties like yours at this point in time, but it's first come, first serve. And I think Denise will maybe answer your questions better than I can.
Thank you, Councillor Bonato. So there is a reserve, but the allocation, if it's not used, would be then reallocated to somebody else. That's how tight the reserve is. So it's critical that you meet the conditions under which the consent application has been given.
So if we were to meet those conditions quickly, let's say within 3 months, for instance, and we got that allotment, is that rescindable? Like, are you be able to take that back if we don't put a structure up within those 2 years, or assuming we have the conditions met, is that locked in for us?
I can answer. Sorry.
Go ahead, Valerie. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, it's like you are subject to a timeline, 2 years to fulfill those conditions of the conditional approval. You have 2 years.
But
to get
if we were to meet those within 3 months, for instance, just as a hypothetical, but we didn't build, let's say for a year and a half down the road, would we lose that allotment? Is assuming we got our conditions met within 3 months. Is there any chance that that allotment would be taken away and given to somebody else?
For the water and sewer.
I might defer that back to the town to answer. It's maybe my understanding that it shouldn't take your capacity away if you've gotten final approval for your consent.
So I'm gonna have to say
Yeah.
no. So there's an ability to extend if the conditions aren't met under which the timelines are provided. However, with the conditions being so precious at the moment in terms of the allocation, that would be something that council of the day would have to decide. So water is not the issue. It's the waste treatment plant. So you can set aside the water issue in terms of the allocation challenges on an infill. However, again, your sewage treatment plant allocation is coming out of a very limited reserve. And there are many applications looking for that limited reserve. If you didn't fulfill those requirements, there could be, yes, an opportunity or an option that those would not be reallocated to you and they would be allocated to someone else. And therefore the property would need to wait until the waste treatment plant expansion was completed in order to have the capacity that you need for your redevelopment or whoever.
So I think if I'm reading between the lines, you're saying that it would be beneficial for us to meet those conditions quickly, get that sewer allotment in and locked in. And then I think by the sounds of it, we would be safe moving forward.
Just to clarify, you have 2 years to meet your requirements.
Yes. Yeah. So so we would try to get those met as quickly as possible to get that allotment. And then again, we're just worried that we would go through this time and expense and get those conditions met quickly. And then all of a sudden the rug would be pulled out and we wouldn't have our sewer allotment. So that would be our concern, right? But if you're saying, if you work diligently to get it done quickly, that won't happen if you meet all your conditions. Any disagreement with that kind of synopsis?
No, the only thing I would add is, the limitations are not, permanent limitations, as Denise mentioned. I mean, there are efforts to expand the water treatment plant. It's just, that is going to take some time. So, in the short term, there are some real limitations there, but that isn't always going to be the case.
So I have a follow-up question. I just want, to be honest, I found this process kind of confusing and I just wanted to be really clear. So when that is granted, that allotment for water and sewer, does that come with the conditional consent, or does that come when somebody applies for a building permit? When are those, at what stage in the process are those allotments given?
Denise, do you want to clarify that, when the actual reserve is granted?
I think when Steve comes back, we can clarify, but again, generically, you are the applicant and you are getting the consent and the approvals as the applicant for this. The fact that you are severing the lot to sell it is somewhat outside of the process. Okay. So if you didn't sell it for a year, your approvals are granted now. So that clock is ticking. Okay. So it's not 2 years from the point where you sell it. It's 2 years from this process being completed.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. Are there any other questions from committee members? Jennifer, no public members signed on?
No, sir.
No. Okay. All right. So Valerie, the recommendation is to approve the consent based on the conditions that you outlined. Are there any committee members prepared to make a motion to that effect? Member Bernardo, is there a seconder for that? Member Buffett, okay. So I'll read the motion, and then if there's any further discussion, we can entertain that. So motion moved by Member Bernardo, seconded by Member Buffett, that after considering the application, the committee is satisfied with allowing this consent for the purpose of severing 392 square meters of land from the original 831.24 square meters of lot area. The committee, having regard to those matters under subsection 5124 of the Planning Act, as amended, resolves to grant provisional consent subject to the following conditions being met. Number one, the Secretary Treasurer's certificate under subsection 5342 of the Planning Act shall be issued and the Secretary Treasurer's fee be paid. Number two, the payment of cash in lieu of parkland at the rate of 5% of the value of the created lot. Number three, that the owner enter into an agreement with the town addressing the following matters. A, site servicing and drainage requirements and the details of all servicing connections, modifications and improvements to existing services, including sanitary sewers, water supply, storm sewers, roads, sidewalks, hydrants, utilities, and any required easements deemed necessary by the town in accordance with town standards and to the satisfaction of the town's Director of Development and Operations and the town's engineer. B, the requirement to construct a new driveway and required parking spaces on the severed lot. C, the requirement to provide drawings indicating the location and details of the driveway, including the requirement for replacement of any trees requiring removal to the satisfaction of the town. D, design guidelines for the new dwelling to be constructed on the proposed severed lot with input from the Heritage Committee. And E, the payment of all required fees. Number four, that the owner obtain approval of a zoning bylaw amendment for the two resultant lots to a zone that will accommodate the proposed lot areas, yards, and setbacks. Number five, that approval of the draft reference plan as applicable shall be obtained at the Committee of Adjustment office, which is the town office, and the required number of prints, which is 3 of the resultant deposited reference plan, should be received. And finally, number 6, that the conditions are to be fulfilled and the consent is to be finalized on or before 2 years from the date of the issuance of the committee's notice of decision. Okay, so the motion's on the floor. Are there any further comments or discussions on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. All right, so we will deal with the other matter during the regular council meeting. So Valerie, I'll turn it back over to you to present the report for the minor variance application.
Okay. So the following public meeting is being held as an application for a minor variance has been submitted by Orville Finley for the property at 105 Morden Drive, which is located in the Greenbrook Village subdivision. The purpose of the minor variance application is to request relief from the zoning bylaw in order to construct a converted dwelling unit within the existing single detached dwelling. The application is seeking relief from the regulation which prohibits converted dwelling units within the cellar as defined in the zoning bylaw. The subject property is approximately 423 square meters in area and has a lot frontage of approximately 11 meters onto Morden Drive. The subject property is designated residential in the town's official plan and is zoned residential type 3, exception 1. In the zoning bylaw. So attached here, you can see on the sketch is an outline of the property boundaries, as well as an outline of the existing structure, the single detached dwelling on the property. You can see here that there is an existing double car garage that can provide parking for 2 vehicles. It's also demonstrating that the existing driveway could also accommodate additional vehicle parking as well. And then it's also showing what's being proposed as the second unit entrance for the basement apartment, which is at the rear of the property. This might be a little difficult to see, but what the floor plan is really just showing is that it's a 2-bedroom basement apartment with washrooms, furnace, all the accessories, kitchen. Again, just highlighting that the proposed rear entrance is located in the rear. The application submitted is seeking relief from the zoning bylaw, which defines a converted dwelling unit as a dwelling unit which has been altered or converted as to provide 2 dwelling units, one of which shall be located in the cellar of the dwelling. So relief from the zoning bylaw is being required to permit a dwelling unit to be located entirely in a cellar. So when we're considering a minor variance application, we need to ensure that it meets the 4 tests. 1, is it minor? In our opinion, it is. The unit will be within the cellar and will not alter the appearance of the existing dwelling and will not impact any of the streetscape. The second is the application desirable? Yes, in our opinion, it is. The site is appropriately designated and zoned within the residential area where an additional dwelling unit is permitted. It will not impact the exterior view of the street. As part of the municipal approval, any access fill from the excavation, and that's for the rear access, as well as I believe a window needs to be constructed as well. But any debris or excess fill will need to be properly disposed, and disturbed areas will be required to be restored to maintain a positive drainage on the site. Parking is being provided and additional housing is being provided without changes to the setback. So the next thing to consider is, does the application conform to the general intent of the zoning? In our opinion, it does. It is the intent of the zoning bylaw to permit single detached dwellings to be converted to include a second unit in appropriately designed spaces that meets all applicable regulations. The current definition of a cellar in the zoning bylaw limits the use of lower levels in many homes, although many new dwellings have adequate ceiling heights. So as mentioned earlier, the property contains a double-car attached garage, and it will meet the parking regulations for an additional dwelling. And there's no other variances that are going to be required. Also, we need to consider if the application conforms to the general intent of the official plan. In our opinion, yes, the lands are designated low density residential and permits a variety of residential uses, including single detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings. One of the objectives of the designation is to ensure that a variety of housing types are accommodated to accommodate economic and social needs and desires of the residents. Subject to, again, we circulated the application to departments and external agencies, and no comments or objections were received. Subject to consideration of any comments and submissions received at this public meeting, we are recommending that the Committee of Adjustment grant approval of the minor variance application. And this is subject to the following conditions. 1, that there's confirmation of sufficient reserve servicing capacity by the town engineer for additional residential unit, and this would be prior to municipal approval of the building permit. And second, the owner shall obtain a building permit for the additional residential unit within 1 year of satisfying condition 1. So this concludes my overview of the application, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Valerie. We've seen a number of similar applications in recent memory. And I mean, as Steve has mentioned, there's probably some value in revisiting our bylaw to kind of tidy some of this outdated language up. But anyways, as it stands right now, this is what we have to work with. So are there any questions amongst members for Valerie? No? Okay. Any questions from any public members? Okay. Is there a motion that any member would like to make? The recommendation is that we approve it. Okay. Moved by Member Hall. Is there a seconder for that? Member Fegan. Okay, so the motion will read as follows. After considering the application, the committee is satisfied that the request is minor in nature, desirable for the appropriate and continued use of the subject property. and maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and official plan. Accordingly, the committee resolves to grant the request. The minor variance is granted to permit a converted dwelling at 105 Borden Drive, with the second dwelling unit located in the lower level of the existing dwelling, notwithstanding that the zoning bylaw does not permit a dwelling unit within a cellar as defined in the bylaw. And all of that is subject to the following two conditions. Number one, that the owner shall obtain confirmation of sufficient reserve servicing capacity by the town engineer for the stage 1 area, an allocation of servicing for the additional residential unit prior to municipal approval of a building permit. And number two, that the owner shall obtain a building permit for the additional residential unit within 1 year of satisfying condition 1, failing which the servicing allocation shall be revoked and this minor variance shall lapse unless the committee grants an extension prior to expiry. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. All right. So that's it, Valerie, for Committee of Adjustment then? Yeah. Okay. All right. Can I have a motion then to adjourn the Committee of Adjustment meeting? Moved by Member Fegan, seconded by Member Hall. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. All right. So we'll move over to our regular council agenda then. We'll call this meeting to order at 7:06. And we will begin with the playing of the national anthem. So I'd ask that if you're able, please join us in standing for that. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. And we encourage residents to review the call to action information by visiting the website on the screen in front of you to further research and educate oneself. Just a reminder to all members of our obligation to declare any pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. On to the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our regular council meeting from June the 13th, 2022? Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so the first item is our planning public meeting, and this is in relation rather to the consent application that we just considered. So as you recall, one of the conditions of that granting of the consent was for this zoning bylaw amendment. So tonight's public meeting is being held under Section 34 of the Planning Act and is to consider the application for zoning bylaw amendment for the lands municipally known as 307 Victoria Street. The purpose and effect of the amendment is to rezone the property from residential type R2 zone to residential type 2 exception 7 zone and residential type 2 exception 8 zone. So with that, I will ask the clerk to provide the method of notice for tonight's public meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in local media sources. Notice has been posted on the town's website. And notice was provided to property owners within 120-meter radius of the subject property.
Okay, thank you. So Valerie again will provide a presentation for us. Following that, there will be an opportunity for members of council to ask questions and provide comments. Members of public who are signed on, and I think there may be a member or two on here now, are also permitted to ask questions, provide comments. The clerk will also be accepting written submissions, and all submissions, written or oral, will be given consideration by the council prior to any decision being made. So Valerie, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, an application for a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Anthony and Christy Sarbowski in conjunction with an application for consent for the creation of a new residential lot. The purpose and effect of the application is to rezone the property at 307 Victoria Street from residential type 2 to residential type 2 exception 7 for the proposed retained lot and residential type 2 exception 8 zone for the proposed severed lot. So as we discussed earlier, the property is located at the southwest corner of Victoria Street and Center Street and is approximately 332 square meters. Concurrent to the zoning bylaw amendment, the applicant has submitted an application for consent for the purpose of severing a residential lot from the existing property. So the applicant is seeking to rezone the lots from residential 2 to 2 site-specific residential type 2 zones. So the site-specific provisions proposed for the retained lot is to recognize that the existing lot frontage, which is 16.8 meters along Victoria Street, also to recognize the existing front yard setback, which is 2.6 for the front wall of the building. Also to recognize the existing exterior side yard, so that's 2.1 meters for the east side for the existing dwelling, and also to permit parking within a driveway in the front yard, including the required front yard to satisfy the parking requirements. So the site-specific provisions being requested for the proposed severed lot include a reduced front yard of 4.6 meters, whereas 6 is required, a reduced rear yard of 5.2 meters, whereas 5.5 is required, and a reduced lot area of 392 square meters, whereas 464 square meters is required. And this is subject to the provision of the enlarged side yard at a minimum of 6 meters for the north side yard. So I have a graphic. This chart just outlines the R2 here is the regulation, and this is for the proposed retained lot where the existing building is. Basically, we're just recognizing existing zoning, and really there's no changes except for the lot area is getting smaller. And then for the proposed severed lot, you can see that we're asking for a reduced lot area, front yard, and minimum rear yard. So this graphic kind of shows a little better. Again, these are just recognizing existing setbacks, as well as the parking in the front yard. Also, obviously, both lots are having a reduced lot area, so that's being recognized. Here, the front yard setback is being reduced, is requested to be reduced, as well as the rear yard to 5.2. But as I said, there is going to be a requirement that there is a 6 meter interior side yard on this side to compensate for the reduced rear yard. I didn't really have too much more to say. The existing, I guess I could just say the existing two-story residential dwelling on the retained property will be maintained. And the new single detached dwelling would be proposed, obviously, on the new lot. So subject, again, the application was circulated to departments and external agencies, and no comments received or no objections have been received on the application. So subject to any consideration and input received at the public meeting, we are making a recommendation that the proposed bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and receive final passing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions from council members? Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Mills. So I guess my question is just sort of as maybe Mayor Mills spoke during the Committee of Adjustment, and wondering why the lot, the severed lot, is so much smaller than the retained lot. I mean, we're looking at almost like 70-ish, meters squared that we are below what is the recommended size of a lot. So that's substantial, right? And just wondering why we can't even that up a little bit more, or maybe why it's being proposed to be so much less.
I think there's some other examples that we've dealt with within the town of Shelburne that have proposed similar lot sizes and also situated on corner lots. So there's already been a precedent set in that regard, that lot size has been accepted within the area, as well as the regulations that we're proposing are pretty standard for new lots. Like I'm saying, the 1.2, the side yard is a standard setback, as well as I know there's a reduced rear yard, but we are enhancing the interior along the laneway to enhance that as well.
Okay, so there's no way to sort of even that up a little bit just to make the lots, the severed lot a little larger? Like, it just seems really small. I mean, is there going to be a reduction in the size of the house that's going to be built on the lot then? Or, just for me, I feel like it's, much smaller than, what we see. And regardless, I mean, I don't know how many other lots in the town, off the top of my head were approved for this size, but I just feel that it's a lot less. So that is a little concern.
Any other questions from council members? Not seeing any. Any questions from any public members who are registered?
Yes. Len Gashardi.
Oh, Mr. Gashardi, how are you?
How are you, Mayor?
Good, good. I think proper protocol, if you don't mind, just state your full name and address.
Right. Len Gashardi, 141 Main Street West, Shelburne, Ontario. With regard to what Councillor Wagner was saying, with regard to the lot size, a 2-meter adjustment to the lot line on the west side of that proper, I guess it would be to the, if it's facing, it'd be to the side parallel to Victoria Street, would even that lot up and not take a substantial amount of lot away from the existing property. There's also a very large tree in the middle of that property. And would it not make sense to combine the lot that is on the north side of the properties, pardon me, the driveway on the north side of the property with the driveway that is proposed for the rear or the laneway? See what I'm saying? Shift the driveway that is to combine it, shift that driveway to the east, so to combine it with the driveway that's going to be proposed on the laneway. So there's a better setback on the driveway that's on the street.
What are you talking about?
Do you follow that, Valerie?
Without having without having a pointer and drawing the.
Yeah.
Okay, so step one would be shift the lot line 2 meters to the. It would be to the west, right? So
Yep.
is that's an easy one. Like, I mean, that's an easy description of, you understand what I'm saying there?
Yep.
That's not taking a lot away from the existing property, and it does balance it up a bit. Okay. Secondly, like I say, there's a tree dead center in that property, and I was in on the earlier meeting, and I know it wouldn't be they were saying it was just the one tree that would be moved, and I'm okay with that, provided there's something placed, put in its place somewhere else on the property, even if it's a smaller tree.
Yeah, I think the actual, the final details of the proposed driveway and the positioning can be finessed through the consent agreement on the property. And if that means it can save a tree, I think we could work out those details for sure. And I mean, I know new trees don't replace mature trees, but if a tree did have to be removed, I know they look at a 1-to-1 ratio for replacement trees. And then we would hopefully work with, an arborist and figure out where, if we had to do replanting, what kind of species and location would work best so that it would thrive over the years. But like the owners had said, right now this is a fatigue, there's no, what we're proposing here, this dwelling is a bit of it's just a sketch, really, because they don't have any intentions of actually building anything right away. So this could change ultimately, as long as they, the actual location of the driveway could change, is what I'm saying, I suppose.
Yeah, it would just make sense to have the driveway set back farther from Victoria Street by moving it.
Sorry, I was referring to the new lot. You're talking about the retained lot on Victoria.
No, I am speaking about the new lot. No, okay, we're all good. All I'm speaking about is the new lot. We're all good.
Okay.
So just to not be confused. So the driveway proposed.
The new lot, the driveway is coming from the laneway, just to be clear. And we're trying not to have a driveway come from Center Street. And that's for two things. We don't want more traffic coming there. And then we also, or any kind of, coming in and out of the driveway on Center Street. And we also want to preserve the streetscape along there. So if we can ideally put the driveway on the laneway, that was the thinking.
Okay, it's just the drawing had shown two driveways.
Oh,
there's one driveway onto Center Street. There's one driveway and the off the laneway.
Oh, you may just interpreted that differently. I think it's just the arrow showing the setbacks. The only driveway that we have that I showed in my presentation was off the laneway.
Off the laneway, okay.
I think I see what you're referring to now. And yeah, there were two arrows that were running parallel off of Center Street. And that's just indicating two different setbacks because Center Street runs at an angle. But okay. I can see what you mean that, you thought that was a driveway, yeah.
Okay, I misinterpreted that as a driveway and apologize, but so there's only one driveway on that, and it's off the laneway. Yeah. Okay, good, terrific, thanks. Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Okay, any other questions then or comments from Council? No. Valerie, any final comments before I ask for a motion?
I do just have one final comment, and it kind of stems from the consent agreement. I was able to converse with Steve Weaver, and just to clarify that it would be in the consent agreement that we would map out the process and timing for obtaining allocation and approval after the lot's created, and that's in regard to servicing allocation. just to clarify that.
All right, so the recommendation contained in Valerie's report is to provide the zoning amendment that's being requested. Is there a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Okay, so the motion then will read as follows: be it resolved, the council receive report P 2022-019 as information, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 33-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 38-2007 to rezone lands municipally known as 307 Victoria Street in the town of Shelburne from residential type 2 R2 zone to residential type 2 exception 7 zone and residential type 2 exception 8 zone as shown on schedule A1 to the bylaw. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, thanks, Valerie. Okay, so next up is public question period. I know there's at least one member of the public with a question. Gary Whitworth, are you still on the line with us?
I'm here. Can
All right.
I begin?
You can. So for question period, you have 2 minutes. It is a question. And I'll just, before you begin, I'll just get you to state your name and address.
Okay. My name is Gary Whitworth. I live at 305 Andrew Street, Shelburne. First off, I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to talk with you. I'm a citizen of Shelburne. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. I've been trying to talk to you since May 17th when I applied. I want to talk about some problems in our town schools, serious problems, which I believe we should have acted immediately on because of the way they have escalated. Some of you will know about these. When there are children that fear for their lives and have nightmares about being shot and killed, and yes, that's what they are afraid of, we as adults are at fault. Children do not see skin color. It is adults who teach children that there is a difference. Words can be harmful, very harmful. Why do we want to segregate and raise one race over another? Why do we want to teach the difference in color? I'm sorry, Steve. I personally do not agree with your time at Glenbrook teaching how great a race is. All races are great. I disagree with this article in the paper that it was a great turnout. I know there were a lot of parents who held their children at home because they were afraid of threats that have been made. I know of 14 actual in one class. I personally do not think that helped the cause of what was happening in the school, as there already was a division between white and colored children. I know there are counselors in attendance that have declared conflict of interest, and that's okay. I am not so much looking for your comments as I am asking that council calls a whole town meeting. I have already discussed a town meeting with some council members and they have agreed that it is needed. I would propose that we hold a meeting in the high school auditorium having council, parents, principals, teachers, school board trustee, and the OPP liaison officer invited to attend. I have personally talked to all of those, some parents, principals I've discussed with, teachers, Lynn Topping, the school board trustee, and Jennifer Roach, the OPP officer. I've personally talked to them. I look forward to your support, and I ask the town council to officially call this meeting. Jennifer Roach, probably you all know that the OPP cannot enter a school anymore. The board has ruled that out. Unless they call, they cannot enter the school. To me, that is absolutely wrong. Police should be allowed to go anywhere. I'm asking your support tonight to call that meeting and have everybody there. I'll do as much as the inviting people that I can, but I'm asking you guys for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I think the question, and Mr. Whitworth and I had an opportunity to speak briefly this afternoon as well. And I think the question is, are we as a council prepared to take part in a public meeting? My answer to Mr. Whitworth this afternoon remains the same as it is now. Absolutely. The statement that I had released a little over a week ago, which is actually contained in the correspondence package tonight, indicated that. In as much as I said that we are committed to taking part in solutions. However, we cannot be the only player at the table. And one of the most significant players at the table must be the schools and school boards. And quite frankly, if we cannot have them at the table, then I don't think we can have a constructive conversation about this. The incident which occurred at the high school, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later on this evening, I suspect, as I understand it, is still under investigation officially within the school. To my knowledge, no result has been released from that investigation. And so I think, to answer your question directly, yes, we're prepared to take part in that solution. The larger question is, when is the appropriate time? I think sooner the better, obviously. But as I said, it has to be at a time when all players who are involved are willing to commit to being at the table. So what I will commit to you, sir, tonight is to work with the other stakeholders involved, including the representatives from the school board, the OPP, and we'll see what we can get coordinated.
So do you want me to send emails out to these people with CC'd you, or who is going to instigate?
That's fine. You're as a citizen, as a ratepayer, you're obviously more than able to send emails to your elected representatives. If you have children in the system, then I think by all means you can send communications to the school administrators, superintendents, whatever you're comfortable with. But as I said, I will make a point of reaching out myself to those individuals to see if we can get sort of broad commitment from everybody to have a discussion about solutions.
Okay, very good, I guess. I'm going to talk to the principal and see of the high school and see if he'll give us a date, if we can use the auditorium first, and then go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, council. Appreciate the time. Bye
Enjoy
for
the
now.
rest of your evening. Okay. Any other questions for question period? Okay, I don't see any. So that takes us to council inquiries. Any inquiries for this evening? Councillor Fegan and then Councillor Bonato.
Mine should be fairly quick. I was honored to take part in the flag raising for recognition of the Indigenous Peoples Day. Was happy to see some members of the OPP there and had a great opportunity to speak with, I believe, Sergeant Paul Newman. And he actually made a request to me that made perfect sense. In describing the situation, I think the rest of council would agree as well. Right now, as it stands, the OPP have dedicated 2 officers at all times within our town borders. And the problem that they are facing is that anytime that there's an incident that occurs within the town, they need to drive back to Primrose and spend a couple of hours in a chair in an office to fill out the reports. The request that he made seems pretty simple to me, and that's that he's asking if it's possible for us as council to dedicate a space, simple office space, a single chair, a single desk, where the officers can remain within the town borders in order to fill out the reports. Apparently, there's other municipalities who have rented out space, storefronts, that sort of thing, where the OPP are able to use that space for this purpose. And one of the thoughts that I had within the town hall, we still have a few rooms, to my knowledge, and Denise, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have some rooms still that are unoccupied that could be served for this purpose. So, and I mean, if it comes down to me making a notice of motion later on tonight, I'm more than happy to do that. But I thought I'd bring this forward to council based on the information that I was given that day, and maybe have a bit of a discussion here.
Okay, Denise, do you want to offer any comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Mills. I'd suggest that, there would be analysis that would be necessary for us to review this request, including the fact that we now have an armed building that has codes with each staff person having that, and the building is activated and then armed as we leave and enter. Most of the space has been redeployed except in the basement. This would have contractual impacts because of coming into our building. We would have to have a formal change with our contract with the OPP through the ministry. And we'd also have to work through all the logistics of enter and access. I will note that we did understand through our contract negotiations with the OPP that one of the tremendous benefits that they presented to us in terms of their operational model was that with the mobilization of their cars as offices, that was going to expedite their productivity and their time. And that was one of the main features that we incorporated into the estimated costing that we had. So certainly it would probably be a direction back to us to investigate, to go through all the analysis, what the logistical impacts would be or not. We had been requested in the past, as you may or may not know, that washrooms would be important for access, which certainly during COVID were restricted, but are now back to normal. So if this is dedicated office space, that is something much different. So certainly, yes, we would have to come back with a report for staff, from staff for council's consideration, including contract review with the OPP for access to a building that is armed.
So I think, yeah, why don't, when we get to notices of motion, why don't you make a notice of motion, sort of giving staff formal direction to investigate this and communicate with the OPP to kind of sort through needs and logistics. Okay. Councillor Bernardo.
I have two items I'd like to bring forward. First one is on those, I'll call them sea cans or cubes or whatever you want to call it for storage. Some places in the town, I'm noticing them in the driveways, and while they're there for a month or two because people are either moving out or moving in, that's one thing. But now I've seen a sea can on one person's property and a cube on another person's driveway that's been there for more than almost 4 months. And I'm beginning to wonder if those are now becoming sheds rather than things that you move in and out. And I know that in our new bylaw we recently passed, I don't believe there's any mention of anything about being in driveways. And then those things also restrict the number of parking spaces in those driveways. So I'm just wondering if that's something that we need to change within our current bylaw that we just recently passed.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer, is there anything within our existing bylaw documents that would allow us to address that?
Unfortunately, no, at this time, there isn't anything that addresses CCAN units. But I do know of the units currently in driveways, those houses are currently under renovation. So they have been there for several months while they renovate their properties. One of them being having come before a community adjustment previously.
I'm not talking about the one, this one is not before a committee of adjustment. This is in a place where something was happening that wasn't supposed to be happening.
Yes, and that location is also applying for a building permit as well. Yes.
Applying for a building permit?
Yes.
Oh, I thought we had to give them permission first since the basement's below ground. Okay.
So they're in the process. Yes, they're in the process.
So just sort of, Councilor Bernardo, I just have a follow-up question for Jennifer then. So when a building permit is issued, is there any sort of consideration given to that that those be allowed, to stay temporarily through the construction process, or is it just no? Okay. Okay.
Okay, now the other, the sea cans are not the same thing though, right? Well, I finish up on that one.
So you're talking about storage pods or sea cans?
One place has an actual sea can on its property.
Okay.
So,
And so has that been reported into bylaw?
I haven't reported it. It's
okay,
but I'm just saying I know it's there, but I'm saying if it is reported, there's nothing in our bylaw to touch onto it, right?
To my knowledge, we don't have anything that addresses sea can units.
Okay, that's the point I was trying to make. Okay. The other item that I wanted to bring up was about something that was brought forward to my attention by a citizen regarding music from some of our established business establishments. With the number of trucks that are rolling down our streets, our noise bylaw doesn't allow for music to be played a little bit louder than normal so that people can enjoy it outside in their patios or on their sidewalk establishments. It's pretty hard to hear it when you've got tractor trailers rolling by. And I'm wondering if there's any will within council maybe to change that a little bit of noise bylaw to allow for that music to be played in those establishments.
Jennifer, any thoughts on that? Are you talking about during the day, Councillor Bonato?
Or? During the day and in the evening when they have people that are enjoying it, and something like the Duffy, for example, that has the patio beside it, but trucks rolling by, it's very hard to hear anything, almost hard to even hear yourself. The same thing for Shannon's and some of the other establishments of that nature. Tipsy Fox, the Creamery, those people cannot play music for any with people being outside and enjoying the warm weather in the summertime. They cannot play any of their music because it's very hard to hear it. Our noise bylaw doesn't allow them to play it very, very loud.
Okay. Jennifer?
Thank you, through your worship. Depending on whether or not the outdoor patio is licensed outdoor patios, the playing of music is regulated through the Alcohol and Gaming Commission and not through the town. That would be an AGCO requirement, whether they choose to grant relief to the licensed patio. And in regards to just a general patio that's not licensed, currently the outdoor patio policy as well as the noise bylaw restricts that. We have received several complaints when music is being played. So that would be at council's discretion whether they choose to waive those requirements.
So we don't regulate where alcohol is served at all. They can play their music as loud as they're allowed, or does our noise bylaw kick in at some point in time? I guess it's the question I'm trying to ask.
So a licensed outdoor patio on town property is licensed through the town via Alcohol and Gaming Commission. There is one property, the Duffy, that has private property. That outdoor patio is on private property. It's not on town property. And that that noise requirement is through Alcohol and Gaming Commission and not through the town.
Okay, so when they play the music loud and complaints come in, we don't have any control over it and any of that nature there because it's alcohol and gaming.
It's the Alcohol and Gaming Commission that would be required to grant relief from that requirement.
So I guess, Councillor Bonato, I mean, if you wanted to introduce, the issue for council's consideration, I mean, you're free to do that. I guess the balancing act the council would have to consider is, increasing the level of music for patrons in the establishment, with the potential complaints coming from neighbors who live in close proximity and don't want to hear it. But like everything else we have to deliberate on, there are a number of interests that have to be balanced in the course of our decision making. So I'll leave that up to you if you want to make a notice of motion later tonight or at a future meeting.
Okay.
But at least you have the facts now. So, okay. Any other inquiries before we forge ahead? No. Okay. So the first item is a planning report. Now, Valerie, do you want to deal with this one, or do you want to defer this and wait till Steve comes? It's entirely up to you, whatever you're comfortable with.
I'm prepared to speak to this. And Steve just messaged saying he is actually going to join momentarily. So if I do a quick presentation, he might actually be joining in time to answer any specific questions.
Well, let's stay on track then. So you're going to provide a report dealing with the site plan application for 152 Luxton Way. So I will let you walk us through that report.
Okay. Okay. So a site plan application has been received by the town. For a site plan application, it was submitted by land and building experts on behalf of Select Builders Construction and Renovation Limited. And this is for proposed development at 152 Luxton Way. So the proposed development of the vacant is a proposed development of a vacant industrial site for a one-story warehouse and workshop building. I'll just zoom up here. This one's kind of hard to see, but we have a graphic here that shows that they're proposing a phase 1 and a future phase 2 building as well, and also related site works. The subject property is currently designated employment in the town's official plan and its own employment in the town zoning bylaw. The property has a municipal address of 152 Luxton, and it's about 4,047 square meters in area and has approximately 30 meters of frontage on Luxton Way. So as I said, the property is currently vacant and there's an existing drainage easement along the western boundary of the property. So what the proposal here is including obviously the proposed warehouse and workshop, which is within the phase 1 part of the development, with a future building expansion to the west. This would be the phase 2 expansion. So based on the architectural buildings provided, the phase 1 building will be demised into 2 units of equal size, both with the front entrance on the south side of the building and with interior barrier-free washrooms, as well as a second entrance and a roll-up overhead door on the north side of the building. I have some elevations here. So this would be the south entrances for the 2 units within phase 1. And then these would be the roll-up overhead doors on the north side of the building. So if we go back up here, that would be the north side. The details of the proposed use for each of these buildings have not been specified, but they do indicate a workshop and a warehouse. A warehouse and a workshop are both permitted in the M1 zone. Also, there's about 19 parking spaces that are being proposed, and that includes 2 barrier-free accessible spaces. There's a loading space on the north side of the building as well. There's going to be landscaping provided and snow storage areas as well. There's 11 trees that are being proposed to be planted along the fronts and sides of the property. And that 10-meter existing drainage easement will be retained as well. There are some revisions to the drawings that were provided that are going to be required to address further technical review comments. And this was received from the town engineer. As well, there's a zoning compliance issue with the parking aisle. So that will be, those drawings will need to be revised and resubmitted in order to satisfy those comments that we received. As well, this is the east side of the building. And if you look, it fronts on the Luxton Way. So one of the comments received was that we're going to take this facade. It needs some additional windows and some different treatments with regard to materials, just because it's fronting onto Luxon Way, it does need a little bit more design built into the building. So that we'll also be looking for revised elevation drawings as well. But, you know, our recommendation for the site plan application is 1, receive this report, 2, approve the site plan application. And this would be subject to the owner entering into a site plan agreement with the town. The owner needs to submit the final site plan drawings and information addressing review comments. And this is to the satisfaction of the town engineer and the town planner. And then we're recommending that the bylaw be enacted to execute the site plan agreement. So happy to answer any questions on this application. And I see Steve's joined as well.
Thanks, Valerie. Hi, everybody. Happy to contribute as well. And thanks, Valerie, for the presentation. I think you covered what I would have wanted to present as well. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you're muted.
Wade, you're
Mr. Mayor,
muted.
Thank you. Try to remember what I said. Yeah. Anyway, so first of all, I asked if there were any questions for Valerie or Steve. No. Okay. So as Valerie had indicated, the recommendation is to receive the report and to approve the site plan application on the 2 conditions that she highlighted, and then to provide for the enacting of the bylaw. Is there a mover and seconder for that? By Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Next is a report from our clerk regarding a smoking and vaping bylaw. Jennifer.
Thank you, and through your worship. A quick high-level overview. In keeping with previous reports you have seen from staff, it's been noted that we do have several bylaws that are outdated and do not reference current legislation. So we are currently in the process of updating those. And as you can see, the previous smoking bylaws are very dated, 29 years old. So we do have a separate bylaw that addresses smoking and vaping of cannabis. There's no intention of updating that one at the moment. Our current intention is just to update and bring us compliant with current legislation that relates to smoking and vaping in public places. The proposed bylaw to regulate smoking and vaping will assist with addressing smoking and vaping on property owned or leased by the municipality, including municipal buildings, trails, walkways, parks and parkland, playground areas, outdoor recreational facilities, and special events. The proposed bylaw is provided as Appendix 1 to the report, and happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay. Questions for Jennifer. Councillor Bernardo.
I'm not muted. The question I have is on special events. When we hold special events in Fiddle Park, for example, and there used to be always a smoking area for those who smoke away from the general public, especially when there's alcohol served. That's not going to happen anymore?
No, the new bylaw does not propose that.
So that might make it interesting for people to attend or not attend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wagner.
Hey.
Denise had her hand raised. She might have a reply to Walter just before I start, if that's okay.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Wagner. I just wanted to note that in review of updating our bylaw, we did do a comprehensive analysis of many other municipalities. And it is the norm without exception, that smoking is not permitted on municipal property. And it is, it's something that we haven't yet addressed. So just to let you know, it is the standard that on most municipal property, including how many even private sector operators now work, their patios do not allow smoking, and they separate those activities to mostly homeowners exercising their right to smoke on their own property.
Councillor Wagner.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this one's tricky for me, only because I'm not supposed to sit here and sort of just go with what I feel. I have to think of other people within the town. So I'm a non-smoker. I've always been a non-smoker. I don't vape. I barely drink. So do I care if nobody's allowed to smoke? Not really. But again, I'm not supposed to be here pushing my own agenda. I have to think of those who do smoke or who do vape. And so my only concern with this, with regards to, I mean, Walter made a great point, I guess you could say, with whether or not people will attend events, which we already somewhat struggle for sometimes with attendance, if they don't have a designated area where they can partake in. I mean, let's face it, it's a form of an addiction. So my next issue, I guess, would be, is this something then that would be considered like you can't walk your dog and have a cigarette while you're walking down the sidewalk? Or if you're on sort of a trail and, you know, like one of our little connecting links, I guess you could say, you know, walking and potentially smoking or vaping. You know, how does Fiddle Park or Fiddle Housing, nonprofit housing work into this? Where, you know, we have people who consider this their home and then they're paying rent and they can't walk outside their door in order to have a cigarette or, you know, vape. I'm concerned with those sort of aspects of things. We have people in the town who are taxpayers, and then they're being told that, you know, they can't smoke if they take their dog for a walk down the sidewalk. So, you know, although I can agree with some form of this bylaw, there are certain aspects where I'm worried that we're impeding on, you know, a level of control that is concerning, right? I mean, you know, obviously we shouldn't be smoking or vaping, you know, in parks or on a soccer field or a baseball diamond or anything of that nature. But, you know, if we're looking at this and we're dissecting it to the point where, you know, someone can't walk their dog and have a cigarette while walking down the sidewalk, you know, that's where I have to question, you know, how far we go with something like this. I can definitely see the difference between cannabis and alcohol and that sort of thing, as those are mind altering or potentially mind altering, you know, products as opposed to a vaping product or a cigarette. So yeah, I don't know if it's even a question as it's, I don't know if we can fine tune it where we have a certain aspect and not, but those are my concerns with regards to those in town who do smoke or do vape and, you know, would like to maybe step away from a soccer game or a baseball game in order to vape or smoke, you know, beside their car. But because they're at, you know, Greenwood Park, for example, that would be a municipally owned parking lot, and then therefore could not do that. So yeah, just thoughts and comments on that, I guess, and moving forward from there. Thank you so much.
I had a similar question, actually. The definition under section 3.1, I guess it is, of a municipal trail or walkway, does that include, or is that intended to include sidewalks? Jennifer?
Sorry, so if you look at definition, under definitions 2.1C, highway means a common and public highway, street, boulevard, court, center, parkway, driveway. And then under exemptions, 4.1 B, smoking, vaporizing on any portion of a highway is exempt.
So I guess my question still would be, does highway, I mean, is the definition of highway sufficiently broad to capture sidewalks as well? I mean, it refers to a street and boulevard.
Any part of which is intended for use or used by general public for the passage of vehicles, including the areas between the lateral property lines thereof.
Well, only vehicles. though.
I would say no, it doesn't probably properly capture sidewalk.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, just in terms of my quick looking at it, I think that the way it's drafted, you know, is, you know, people wouldn't be permitted to smoke on sidewalks. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a big problem there if we move forward in that aspect.
What did I say earlier about balancing competing interests? Councilor Bernardo?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not prepared to support this tonight. I'm gonna vote against it. The way it's written, sidewalks aside, it's special events is the other part. I'm going the same direction as what Lindsay was sort of going at. We struggle to get people to come to our special events, especially now post-COVID. We're trying to get people to come out and come to special events. People do smoke. They won't come if they're going to get a $10,000 or $25,000 fine because they're on municipal property and somebody called the bylaw officer on them. And I think that that's not what we're trying. I understand what we're trying to do, and I really do. But we've always set something aside when we do hold special events. And I'm just, you know, thinking if you're going to put a bar or something up in the area, that person's going to have a drink and go someplace and set aside to have a drink and have a cigarette or whatever he wants to have, a vapor. And we have no area for him to do that. So they're not going to come to these events. Why would they? And we're going to lose them at that point. And the other part is, I agree with the mayor. We don't have a proper definition, as far as I'm concerned, you know, regarding sidewalks and those areas there. I can't support it. I'm not going to. I'll be honest tonight. That's my thought.
Jennifer?
And sorry, so perhaps the suggestion to direct staff to provide more definition in regards to sidewalks, and then provide an exemption for special events, and then bring it back to council for further review.
And sorry, just before Shane speaks, would that also then include, like, you know, if somebody's stepping outside a restaurant, for example, that would then have to, you know, smoke on sort of the sidewalk, you know, that sort of thing as well. And then also with regards to our nonprofit housing off of Robert Street, how does that fit in as well? Because again, you know, we have people there that are paying rent, and, you know, they're not necessarily allowed or wanting to smoke inside their apartment. So they step outside to partake. And then yet again, that would be town, you know, municipal owned property where they wouldn't be allowed to do that. So I think we need to define those kind of areas as well. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hall?
I guess just seeking clarification from the clerk, because as I read this and went through, section 4.3 gives you an exception. Maybe it doesn't say special events specifically, but it does, to me, read that, again, if you're looking for an exemption, you apply through 60 days prior to your event for such exemption as we're talking about. At least that's how I read it. So if we can perhaps just get clarification that my reading is correct. So picking in the park, for example, or the Heritage Music Festival as part of their overall activities, 60 days prior to the event, they're applying for the exemption.
Yeah, that certainly would be my reading. So I guess the question is, you know, is 60 days kind of an appropriate time period, you know, for event organizers to get something in? But Councillor Bernardo, did you have a thought on that?
I was just thinking of, for example, the Legion parking lot. That's town property. That doesn't belong to the Legion, belongs to us. Now they hold an event during that, you know, outside in their own parking lot from time to time. 60 days to get permission to hold it, you know, to me it seems like a bit of a lengthy period of time to apply just to get, you know, permission to hold that you're holding your event. You've already got a whole bunch of other things hoops we're going through to hold your event. Now you got 60 days of another hoop to go through to hold it. Do they need 60 days? They need council permission. All they have to do is get in front of the council meeting at 2 weeks prior, the same as anybody else.
I think the curling club scenario would be similar. I think the town needs the parking lot there as well.
The whole curling club belongs to the town, not just the parking lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, excuse me, based on what I'm hearing, I'm happy to make a motion to receive the report and ask staff to come back with a revised draft bylaw based on the comments made by council tonight. I mean, I don't want to specify each and every comment because that will allow staff, I think, the flexibility to go back and kind of listen to the dialogue tonight and hopefully capture, all of the things that were discussed, including, the nonprofit housing. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make that motion if there's a seconder. Councillor Fegan. Okay, any further discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Okay. All right, next is another report from our clerk regarding a draft traffic bylaw. And I'll stress the word draft before I turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. And through your worship, the current traffic bylaw was enacted in 1983. And due to conflicting amendments, it's realized by staff that the most efficient course of action would be to create a new parking and traffic bylaw, as well as introduce the revised set fines council has directed staff to implement. Before you this evening is just in draft form, the bylaw. We do intend on seeking public input through survey options, through Bang the Table, through our Facebook and Instagram social media accounts. With the growth and changes experienced by the town, there has been a demand for enforcement of offenses that have not been captured in the current bylaw. The review of the traffic bylaw is an opportunity to refresh and modernize the town's bylaw as well as enforcement practices. Increased and enhanced dedicated parking enforcement will now include late afternoons, evenings, and weekends. Some of the suggested changes include and recognize repeated complaints from residents regarding the change in parking from winter to spring, summer, and fall, and when town roadways effectively become parking lots where residents remove vehicles from storage or from driveways, park vehicles for extended periods of time on the street. Those vehicles utilizing the street as parking spaces interfere with regular maintenance, garbage collection, large item waste collection, street sweeping, painting, that sort of thing, emergency services. Staff are recommending that council consider extending the overnight parking provisions from the winter season to a year-round approach. It would, of course, proactive winter parking would remain in place from November 1st until April 30th. Between May 1st and October 31st, the overnight parking provisions would be complaint-based enforcement, so reactive. Simultaneously, bylaw staff are recommending that a 5-hour limit for parking on any street between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday to Friday, exclusive of statutory holidays. Currently, the Highway Traffic Act provides for a minimum of 3 hours. However, municipalities have the ability to change the maximum hours. So there is rationale to not enforce the 5-hour parking requirements on weekends. Oftentimes weekends and holidays are when residents are most likely to have guests that require the use of on-street parking. On-street parking should be utilized by out-of-town guests and not by residents with more vehicles than can be accommodated in their garage and on their private driveway. So the additional proposed changes for in the draft bylaw in front of council this evening also include their 16 bullet points on page 3. For example, no parking so as to overhang the curb, sidewalk, or boulevard, no parking in the center of a cul-de-sac. And of course, we have to incorporate parking requirements for our electric vehicle charging stations. Staff have taken the opportunity to reorganize the provisions within the bylaw. We've updated some terms within the bylaw to reflect modern language standards. We've clarified some definitions. We're trying our best to reduce parking congestion on streets, reduce interference with road maintenance. So Bylaw Services continues to enforce the traffic bylaw in accordance with historical practices. Due to staffing resources, not all provisions of the parking bylaw were enforced with regularity, which left many residents questioning why they're receiving tickets for violations that were not enforced in the past. Bylaws and enforcement policies that accompany them have to change to meet the increasing demand for service and enforcement, which includes enforcement during the day, evenings, overnight, on weekends, and year-round. With the expansion of Shelburne's Bylaw Services team, and in response to Council's request for enhanced and proactive enforcement model, additional education and increased communication as to the parking offenses and the rationale for enforcement practices are going to be conducted. Staff are continuing to recommend a hybrid enforcement model that will include proactive and reactive. A zero tolerance approach will be taken in regards to high risk or potential high risk offenses, such as accessible parking spots. Those are going to still be proactively enforced. Parking in front of fire hydrants, on or over the sidewalk, those continue to be proactively enforced. Bylaw staff are currently researching parking enforcement technologies that will allow Bylaw Services to modernize the parking processes and practices by implementing a digital format that would provide significant efficiencies in regard to staffing resources in order to process parking tickets. And so attached as appendix 2 to this report is set fines and early payment options, noting that in review of neighboring municipalities and comparators with regard to set parking fines, there are several increases being recommended in conjunction with the resolution passed by Council in 2019 to establish set fines at $40 per offense. So in conclusion, the proposed bylaw and enforcement practices will provide staff with the tools to adequately regulate traffic and parking responsibility and appropriately to best serve the residents of the town and meet Council's requests of a more proactive system of enforcement. Of course, as noted previously, we will be doing some public engagement, and this is before you tonight as in draft form for your comment and review. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. I'll just say for my part, and I mentioned this to Jennifer earlier, I'm not sure I'm personally sold on some of the new suggested parking restrictions, particularly the year-round ban on-street parking. You know, even though during the summer months it's being suggested that would be enforced on a complaint-driven basis. Just, I mean, the number of times we've talked about parking challenges that we have already in the community, I'm concerned that such a move might only serve to increase those strains and stresses. But I mean, that said, I'm certainly fine with floating this out for public comment and see what everybody else feels. But you know, on first blush, those are some of my initial concerns. Councillor Bonato.
I had similar concerns on the year-round parking. I mean, I can see it maybe in some areas of the community, it becomes a problem. There's a lot of streets where it's not a problem. You can park in there, and the time frame for parking of 5 hours. If I move my truck out of my driveway and park in front of my house, I can only park for 5 to 6 hours. It's, you know, somebody comes along and puts a ticket on it because they've been parked there for 6 hours. Meanwhile, I've been away, you know, doing something else with another vehicle. Even in driveways, when you have 4 vehicles, sooner or later, you got to move certain vehicles out of the way so the other vehicles can move in and out. So I have a little problem there. But with that, I don't get the changeover on the year-round parking at all. It just, to me, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. In some areas, I agree. It may be a problem, but the other issue I want to make, it's great that we have supposed enforcement, but up until now, I haven't seen it really effective because there's people that still park where there's no parking signs, and they get away with it. They can park all night and all day in the wrong area. Or, you know, you're driving down the street, you see vehicles on both sides of the streets when you know they're not supposed to be on both sides of the street. So that's always been my complaint. Until we get on to the ones that are, not doing our current bylaws regarding parking, it becomes an issue for me, just passing more bylaws for people to ignore. The other question was on the parking fines. It's a $40 parking fine you're recommending in this draft bylaw?
That was council direction provided to staff in 2019.
Yeah, in 2019. Everything's gone up since 2019. Inflation is in. I think it's time we inflate the parking fines too. What's $40 out of a pocket? Nothing.
75.
It's a joke. You can park for $40. It costs you that much to park in Toronto in a parking lot. And even more sometimes. It's a joke. You want people to stop and flagrant the bylaws, you got to have a fine that really hurts them. And then they'll stop, doing the wrong thing. Otherwise, it's just a joke. That's the end of my comments.
Anybody else? Councillor Wagner?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Mills. First off, I would just like to, acknowledge staff and thank them for their efforts with this. Parking and traffic is a thorn in all of our sides. So I really appreciate the time and effort you've put into drafting something like this. I also share the same sentiments with Mayor Mills and Councillor Bonato, where I feel that there are certain aspects of this bylaw that I simply can't get behind. But I understand where you're coming from, and again, trying to create that balance, right, that Mayor Mills spoke about. And but I also sort of agree with Councillor Bonato, where I think if we are focusing a little bit more on penalizing those offenders, we might see maybe a little bit of an improvement, I guess you could say, in relation to, some of the negative aspects of what we consider for parking on the roads as, garbage collection and whatnot. So I'd really love to see a little bit more of that increase in that proactive behavior with regards to, parking in the wrong spaces when there's signage and whatnot. In relation to that, I think the $40 may be fair. I don't know about you, but I don't like wasting $40. But I've also been called cheap, so I don't know if we can, if we can increase that or not, I suppose. But one thing I will say too, I believe when we spoke with OPP, they kind of did suggest that actual on-street parking can be beneficial with regards to slowing down speeders. And, we know that we do have a speeding problem, not just us, of course, everywhere has this issue too. So I don't want to deter too much from something of that nature as well, where we could try to help, slowing down cars, because we do have some parked, vehicles on the side of the road. And I mean, I don't know how much I notice here on William Street when we have cars parked on the road, it still seems pretty fast. But just, I feel that there are certain areas that we could sort of look at and maybe tweak it a little bit here and there. But again, thank you very much for the effort put forth, because this is not an easy one by any means.
Okay. Any Councillor Hall?
Again, I also appreciate the effort that went into this. Obviously, with the electrification being the next move, it's good to see that those aspects are included. I agree there's some difficulty with the overnight parking in the summer months. My feeling as far as the fines, when I look at the fines of the larger centers, the Toronto average fine is $53. So our $40 isn't so far off. And if you look at Waterloo, it's $7.50 for overnight parking. So again, we're not that far off. Is it something that should be reviewed? Obviously, but the first step to finding if it's actually going to be something that's working out is ensuring that, our recently added bylaw officers are out there, again, making certain that we're finding the people first off. We'll find out from that point on if the $40 is acceptable or not. But that's my thoughts.
Denise?
Thanks, Mayor Mills. I just wanted to convey, because I know Jennifer is just too modest and humble that we do appreciate the input and the appreciation to staff. There has been significant review of other bylaws and developing new solutions for us. Certainly appreciate the cautions and of council to date. That's why this is being brought to a consultative process to get in. Action though to increase the fines does affect short form wording and what we have to apply for to formally have that sanctioned as the ability to write that. So if that's going to change, just to give you a heads up, the process to change it and change it again is not an overnight solution. It can take months to have those costs formalized by the province. Some of you have noted that, yes, it may be less than other municipalities, but it may be comparable to some and many. The significant, I guess, impact that we'd like to convey as staff is you're going from 10 to 40. So in a percentage increase, that is significant. So if the $10 was not a deterrent for you, $40 may be. And if you accrue those on a number of basis or a number of times per week, month, or yearly, that may encourage you to look for solutions, including that we do, if it makes sense for you logistically, have municipal lots which provide you with monthly parking at a much more economical option than getting a ticket by parking overnight during a time when you're not supposed to. While I've got the floor, sorry, I also just wanted to note, because of some of the questions, that the year round was also based on some of the other challenges that we incur annually, regardless of snow or not. Waste pickup, recycling, and other units, well, granted that is a contracted service of the town through the county, does not go without challenges when there's cars parked everywhere, both sides of the street in some cases, in terms of maneuvering. That can also spill into other EMS related services. While not as severe or frequent, it can also have an impact. So I just wanted to give you some idea of what kind of thought process went into this, and we'll certainly take back your thoughts. We look forward to getting the public's input before we bring this back through Jennifer and her team again.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay, so the recommendation, at this point simply is to receive the report and essentially to direct staff to engage in some public input on this, and then to return at our July 25th meeting with the draft bylaw that we'll actually consider at that point. So I think taking into account some of the comments made by council tonight, as well as whatever comments are received through the public engagement process, hopefully that will give staff enough information to inform some changes or amendments to this draft, and we'll consider something on the 25th. Can I have a mover and seconder for that motion then? Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Wegner. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Thank you. Next up is CAO's report regarding our guidelines of waiving fees, and this report is in response to some recent requests that have been received. So Denise, I'll let you present that.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. And as the mayor said, this report is exactly in response to the ongoing requests that we as staff receive. We're referring to one in particular tonight, but we do get requests on a regular basis asking town staff to either waive the fees or reduce the fees. At those times, staff will immediately provide the requester with a copy of the waiving of fee guidelines. It was implemented in 2018 by council after you asked us during that budget meeting process whether we had not had a fee waiver policy. There was a number of requests at that time to waive fees, and the council of the day had some questions about equity as well as ability to pay, and assumed that it would probably more, I guess, advantageous and strategic that be vetted through a proper process. And one of those was then the grant process. So this one is specific to then when a request continues to be made to staff to waive the fees. Really what council is being asked to do is waive the conditions of the guidelines and then waive the fees. So I've provided you with just a quick outline of what we're dealing with respect to a current request. Attached as well as included in the analysis what the current conditions are for waiving of fees, and those specifically address the value, not over $500. If that's the case, the maximum of $500 will be waived. and or the requester can be sent to the grant application program. Funding is not provided, and this was established in 2018 after a significant review of the policies with others, to organizations that charge an admission fee, or they charge an entrance or registration fee. Most organizations that are sport-based traditionally charge a registration or program fee to their participants based on the fact that those fees are then utilized to cover the field rental costs or access costs charged by the municipality for their use of that property or field. And fields there, specifically, it also included the terminology and the condition that fees will not be waived to support regular program costs, which usually are field rental costs. So this report has recommended to assist staff in responding to the continual requests that we received, that the conditions of the guidelines are not something that council would consider waiving, that when we as staff receive all future requests, we will continue to provide them with the waiving of fees guideline and redirect those interested parties to the grant funding program. The grant funding process is also important because it allows the consideration of the request, which council would then evaluate, to also include the own source revenues of that organization, any fees charged their participants, and any other grants that they may have received as part of their operating costs, so that the evaluation process can also assess financial need. In 2022, the current fees that we're receiving from the organizations that are using our fields is approximately $14,200. That may go up if additional use is expanded by some of the organizations. In this case, the particular request is not significant in terms of the financial ask, but it is $342 based on utilizing the soccer field for cricket like sport. At KTH for approximately 2 hours based on a time period of July 2nd to October 8th. We've identified as well that if fees were waived and the conditions of the grant, if the policy were waived, there may be opportunities or expectations from other organizations to also present their requests in 2022. And while $14,200 is not a significant revenue to the town, it is a revenue stream, and it also contributes to helping offset the cost of maintaining our parks and fields in summer 2022. So as I mentioned, the waiving of fee guidelines is attached as Appendix 1. The specific request from the Dufferin Cricket Club to waive the field's fees for the use of the soccer field at KTH Park is attached, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I mean, for my part, we already have this guideline, which, in my mind equates to policy established by council. And as you mentioned in your report, I think the key here is, to recognize that many of these requests are essentially asking us to waive the conditions from a policy which is already set to address the waiving of fees. In my mind, we have that policy, let staff sort of administer that. If we're not happy with the conditions that are in that policy, then sure, we can change those. But to continually stray from the conditions that are already set out in our policy, I just think wastes a lot of time. So I'm quite fine with that, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But thoughts from anybody else? No? Oh, Councillor Hall.
Again, I'm in agreement with your points. Again, we already have a process, so just making sure everyone's educated to understand there's a process that exists and that we're supporting the policy as a council, not looking at every time an exception of a one-off or a two-off, or maybe some specific requests with regards to how the area needs to be prepared for said activities as well.
Okay, so the recommendation is to receive the report, confirm that conditions for waiving of fees guidelines will not be waived, and that future requests that kind of fall outside of those conditions be directed to the community grant funding process. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is a draft statement from our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The full statement is contained in the agenda, so I'm not going to read it out verbatim, but it's a statement to address the recent events at the high school. I know that the committee spent a fair bit of time deliberating on this before they arrived at the draft that's before us. And again, similar to some previous statements that we've approved, this is just sort of a formality because they are a committee of council. This body has to approve that statement before it's issued. Any comments, Councillor Fegan or Councillor Wagner, as members of the committee? Do you want to provide any insights on this? Or
I'll just say that, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, we did deliberate quite extensively on the verbiage on this one, because as we as council have even discussed, the weight of even a single word can have drastic effects on how people interpret. So we have come to a statement that I believe, and I personally feel is broad enough and encompasses all hatred and racism in all facets. And I think that's the important thing that we wanted to get across.
Okay. All right. Can I have a motion then to essentially authorize the issuing of this statement by the DEI committee then? Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Buffett. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. All right, that takes us to notices of motion. Councillor Fegan, I assume based on earlier comments, you might want to make a notice of motion.
I would, thank you. So I guess just reading it off, what I've put together here is: be it resolved that council directs staff to investigate the logistics, viability, and cost impacts to provide a dedicated office space within the town hall for use by the LPP to file incident reports while on duty within the town limits, and that a report to be brought back to council.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hall. All right. Councillor Hall, sorry.
Yes, while seconding this, understanding the importance, I would like to ask council for unanimous consent to move this motion tonight.
Okay. All right. Are there any objections to considering the motion tonight as opposed to putting it on the next agenda? Okay, seeing no objection. Put the motion on the floor then. Councillor Fegan, do you want to speak to it beyond what sort of has already been said? Oh, you're muted. We're all having good luck with that tonight.
Too many buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that there's too much to add. It's in my mind, the longer that we can keep the officers within the town limits, the better off we are. I mean, having them at the town hall, they're that much closer to respond in case another incident happens. So to me, it just adds to the value of having them within the town limits.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hall and seconder, do you have anything to add?
Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory as to what the desire is. My need for motion moving forward at a sooner rate gives staff enough additional opportunity as opposed to us waiting for another few weeks in order for us to address it. So,
okay,
that's all.
All right. Any other comments? Denise, are you okay with the clarity then, the direction?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we have to do some work in terms of providing it, and we'll provide that analysis as soon as we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, excellent. Any other notices of motion before we move on to communications? No. Okay. All right, so item 9 is communications, and there are 12 items listed there. Is there anything that
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
I apologize. I just wanted to clarify because of my notes and were you not having a Councillor Bonato with the notice of motion? And I apologize. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something.
I sort of put it out as an option for him to consider, but
Okay, I just didn't want to skip that.
No, I need more time on that motion. It's not something that's easy to write within a few seconds tonight. It'll be something I'll bring back in a future meeting.
Okay. All right. Communications, Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Mills. Just quickly, number 10. I guess this would be sort of a quick question to, I guess, town staff. Is there any possibility with regards to this request for Shelburne kind of assisting in this matter? I'm not sure how or where it could go, but obviously as we're heading into what some financial experts might say is a recession, you know, and we are getting the report from the Shepherd's Cupboard Food Bank that their participation has increased substantially. I just want to make sure that they can continue serving the community of Shelburne and those who require it to the best of their ability. And so just wondering if there's a way, you know, that we as a town can assist with facilitating anything that you know, they require in order to make that happen.
Denise, did you want to offer any thought?
Sure. So through the mayor, I'm assuming most members of council are aware of the surplus process of the province and that location has been deemed surplus and it's being circulated to what they deem other public agencies, which includes government and municipal levels, as well as the not-for-profit sector. The fact that it's being circulated to those agencies does not mean that there's not going to be an expense that's significant associated with the purpose or the purchase. So we know that that is highly desirable property, that there usually is a minimum without us pulling their tender or their quote process. And whether or not the town, which would have to be the purchaser of it, could afford it and then to subsequently be a tenancy-based organization, I would suggest that to understand the needs of the food bank or the cupboard, that it might be beneficial to understand their strategic directions, to understand what regionally or locally is potential alliances that could alleviate some of those challenges that all are facing in terms of land acquisition. And without saying no, it's probably not financially realistic to expect the town of Shelburne, dealing with the financial pressures and stresses that we are facing from an infrastructure perspective, to be able to then purchase what will be a significant property that's probably in a very desirable location for others that would convert that property to other end uses, for example, to be able to compete with that, or whether we should be in that business. So it might be beneficial to request a meeting with the organizing team, where they need to go, where they want to go, and what are the other options in terms of space within the community. And sort of look at that from a more strategic to 20-year outlook, including, while I know that, you know, independence is always important, there is mergers between Orangeville and Grand Valley, for example, working in a very collaborative way. Is that something in the long run that would serve the community better, more fiscally supportive, if that makes sense? Or is there other options for land or tenancy and other properties that we're still just not aware of at the moment? So that's my input. If we had $20 million that we could afford to, I guess, invest strategically or creatively, but as we don't, and again, I don't know what the property will go for, but I don't think it's going to go inexpensively. It's prime land in an amazing location, and we know how attractive that is to those that wish to develop in our community currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. I mean, beyond sort of what has become our annual contribution to the food bank through the community grant funding, I mean, we're not, you know, sort of providing any kind of formal oversight. You know, we're not formally aligned with the food bank. I mean, they do operate sort of as an independent nonprofit organization, which is volunteer based. But, you know, beyond sort of hearing from them on an annual basis as part of the grant funding program, you know, we don't hear a whole lot from them throughout the rest of the year. And maybe we invite them to come out and they can provide sort of a presentation based on some of the challenges that they're finding, and you know, collectively maybe we can start to look at some solutions that may not necessarily be the purchase of this building, but may address some of the challenges that they are facing. So, I mean, I'm certainly more than happy to entertain them here at a future meeting. Jennifer, is that something we could maybe look at by way of extending an invite?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's awesome. I agree. I think that's a great option, and at least opening a dialogue and a conversation. So just to make sure and try and assist them as best we can. So yeah, thank you for that. That's great.
Okay. All right. Anything else from communication then, Councillor Hull?
Number 4. So I would say that our last meeting, and Councillor Bonato, I'm certain, can attest to it as well, we had some deep discussion as to this particular topic, which is the land acknowledgement. What went or came back from that was that each council needed to agree with what the desire or what that acknowledgement needed to be. So I would like to see something come from council tonight back to the board that basically states it's our desire that this acknowledgement be used as the board operates within town limits.
You want to make a motion to that effect then?
Yes, if we could make a motion, again, responding back that the expectation is that the board utilizes the town of Shelburne's land acknowledgement for all future meetings.
And I don't mind that, seconding that, but the thing is also we need to make sure that we send that out to the other municipalities so that they understand and know it, that we're doing this and making this request, because that discussion, it got into the point, each of the other, being a board made up of the different municipalities, it becomes an issue as to, you know, which land acknowledgement you use. And I'm sure that's going to come out at Senator Dufferin at some point, as you know, the arena as well, that the same problem is going to come up there. So as long as we notify the other municipalities that we're going to use Shelburne, because it is within, we'd like to use the Shelburne one because it's within the town limits. I just don't want us, you know, it sometimes becomes an issue when they look at us as the big bullies or whatever, pushing ourselves on top of them. I'd rather see more cooperation.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I read the motion is, you know, they're sort of receiving our revised land acknowledgement and asking that be forwarded on to the various partner municipality councils to seek direction. And I think, Councillor Hall, your suggestion is that our direction be they use ours because the physical location of the station is within the town of Shelburne.
Yeah.
So I mean, if the other councils have differing opinions, and I guess that's something that the board will have to wrestle with and decide which one they take.
I think we'll end up using ours. It's not the issue, but if we push it as we'd like to use ours, and because it's within the town, and that we're just informing them. All I'm saying is we should inform them that we're going to use ours.
And I guess the fact is during the board meeting, they never took it as Shelburne giving direction that this is the one that they were the expectation to use. It was just, hey, here's our acknowledgement. So
yeah,
we're trying to take that step forward.
Yeah. Denise,
so I just wanted to clarify that was, as Councillor Hall and Bonato have mentioned, it was the intention that within the jurisdictional boundaries of the town of Shelburne, that land acknowledgement would apply. If I'm understanding correctly, on other municipal land acknowledgements being read or potentially used, their land acknowledgement may be different than ours because it represents different land and treaties or tribes or bands that were part and parcel of their former community. So they wouldn't be pertinent to Shelburne. And because those buildings under which the motion was directed to send them to, all of those 3 properties are buildings within the town of Shelburne. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. It wasn't by accident that those redirects were suggested, and it was strictly due to the fact that the buildings were within the town of Shelburne, not that the operations were not, limited to the town of Shelburne. That was fully acknowledged, but the buildings are.
And we did mention at our meeting that we're using Dufferin County's land acknowledgement. Basically, it was modeled after theirs. So it pretty well takes in most of the municipalities within the county.
Okay. So we do have a motion then, moved by Hall, seconded by Bernardo. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Anything else in communications? Okay, can I just have a motion then to receive the remaining items? Moved by Fegan, seconded by Hall. All in favor? It's carried. And a motion for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Bernardo, seconded by Hall. All in favor? And finally, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Hall, seconded by Bernardo. All in favor? Carried. All right, thank you all.